नमस्ते, आजको कार्यक्रममा सबैलाई स्वागत छ। आज हामी मार्टिन चौतारीको रिसर्च छलफल श्रृङ्खलामा छौँ। आजको छलफल नन स्टेट एक्टर्स कोलाबोरेसन इन एजुकेसन इन नेपाल पोसिबिलिटिज एन्ड च्यालेन्जेस भन्ने विषयमा रहेको छ। यो छलफलको लागि हामीसँग दुईजना वक्ताहरू हुनुहुन्छ, अमिना सिंह र ऋतु राजवंशी हुनुहुन्छ। अमिना सिंह स्वतन्त्र अनुसन्धानता हुनुहुन्छ। उहाँले युनिभर्सिटी अफ टेक्नोलोजी सिडनी अस्ट्रेलियाबाट पिएचडी गर्नुभएको छ। उहाँ काठमाडौँ युनिभर्सिटीमा पनि आबद्ध हुनुहुन्छ। उहाँले शिक्षा, लैङ्गिकता लगायतको विषयमा अध्ययन अनुसन्धान गर्दै आउनुभएको छ। ऋतु राजवंशी अनुसन्धानदाता र लेखक हुनुहुन्छ। उहाँ क्वियोटी कोभको सम्पादक र भाषा कला प्रशिक्षक हुनुहुन्छ। आजको कार्यक्रम दुई चरणमा हुनेछ। पहिलो चरणमा दुईजना वक्ताले आफ्नो प्रस्तुति राख्नुहुनेछ र दोस्रो चरणमा प्रश्न उत्तर हुनेछ। पहिलो चरणको कार्यक्रम सुरुवात गर्नु अघि मार्टिन चौतारीको केही जानकारीहरू। 12 जनवरी मङ्गलबार मधेस फाउन्डेसनसँगको सहकार्यमा प्राज्ञका नजरमा मधेस आन्दोलन भन्ने छलफल हुँदैछ। उक्त छलफलमा तेजेन्द्र फेराली, पुनम यादव र महेन्द्र लावतीले बोल्दै हुनुहुन्छ। र 19 जनवरी 6 माघ मङ्गलबार अर्थक्वेक आफ्टर सङ्ग्स म्युजिक भिडियोज एन्ड दि इमेजिनिङ अफ एन अनलाइन नेपाली पब्लिक भन्ने विषयमा माइकल हर्टले बोल्दै हुनुहुन्छ। यो कार्यक्रममा पनि यहाँहरू सहभागी हुन सक्नुहुनेछ। अब भने हामी कार्यक्रम सुरु गर्छौँ। अब सुरु गर्दा हुन्छ। अमिना म्याम सुरु गर्दा हुन्छ।
हजुर, हस्, धन्यवाद सञ्चिलाजी। सबैजनालाई नमस्कार। मार्टिन चौतारीलाई आज हाम्रो यो रिसर्च पेपर प्रस्तुत गर्ने यो अपर्च्युनिटी दिनुभएकोमा धन्यवाद छ। आजको यो पेपर चाहिँ ऋतुजी र हामीले केही वर्ष यतादेखि यो एजुकेसन लिडरसिप र एजुकेसन गभर्नेन्समा हामीले रिसर्च गर्दै आइरहेका छौँ। क्युटी कभ र चौतारी सेन्टर फर आर्ट्स अन्तर्गत म चाहिँ अब एउटा स्वतन्त्र अनुसन्धानका हैसियतले आबद्ध छु। र यही दौरानमा चाहिँ हामीले एउटा यो रिसर्च एउटा पेपर चाहिँ लेख्दै आएका छौँ। यो आज हामीले प्रस्तुत गर्न लागेको पेपर चाहिँ अलिकति अझै पनि हाम्रो ड्राफ्ट भर्जनमा छ। सो आजको हाम्रो उद्देश्य चाहिँ यो पेपरलाई ड्राफ्ट पेपरलाई चाहिँ सेयर गरेर यहाँको प्रतिक्रिया, यहाँको इनपुट फिडब्याकहरू लिएर यसलाई चाहिँ अझ सुधार्ने, यसलाई अझ परिष्कृत गर्ने एउटा चाहिँ अवसरको रूपमा हामीले यसलाई लिएका छौँ। सुरुवात गर्नुभन्दा पहिला एउटा अलिकति हाम्रो पोजिसनको रिसर्च र पोजिसनको बारेमा भन्न चाहन्छु। अघि मैले भने जस्तै हाम्रो यो पर्टिकुलर रिसर्च चाहिँ क्युटी कभ र चौतारी सेन्टर फर आर्ट्स त्यो अन्तर्गत पनि यो युएस एम्बेसीको बुक बस भन्ने कार्यक्रम छ। त्यो कार्यक्रमले चाहिँ केही वर्षदेखि यो 2016देखि यसमा अलि ऋतुजीले अझ यसको बारेमा अलिक बढी क्लियर गर्नुहुन्छ। यो इनोभेसन इन एजुकेसन फेयर भनेर एनुअल एउटा फेयर चलाउँदै आइरहेको छ। र यो कार्यक्रम चाहिँ 2019मा दमक नगरपालिकामा आयोजना गरिएको थियो। दमक नगरपालिकाको सहकार्यमा भनौँ। र यो कार्यक्रममा चाहिँ हामी दुईजनै आबद्ध थियौँ। म चाहिँ यो कार्यक्रमको एउटा एडभाइजरको रूपमा पनि म यसमा आबद्ध थिएँ। र यसमा चाहिँ म एउटा फेसिलिटेटर, यसमा चाहिँ 7वटा विभिन्न वर्कसपहरू गरिएको थियो। त्यसमा चाहिँ एउटा पर्टिकुलर यो प्रधानाध्यापकहरूको एउटा कार्यशालामा चाहिँ म चाहिँ एउटा सहजकर्ता भएर आबद्ध थिएँ। र यही 4 दिनको कार्यक्रममा चाहिँ ऋतुजी चाहिँ रिसर्चरको रूपमा त्यहाँ चाहिँ कार्यक्रममा उपस्थित हुनुहुन्थ्यो। र त्यो कारणले हामी दुईजना यो कार्यक्रम जसलाई आधार मानेर हामीले यो रिसर्च गर्दैछौँ त्यसैमा चाहिँ हामी चाहिँ प्रत्यक्ष आबद्ध पनि भएका छौँ। त्यो कारणले हाम्रो यसमा आजको जति पनि कुराहरू छ यो चाहिँ यो पोजिसनबाट हामी प्रस्तुत गर्दैछौँ भनेर राख्न चाहेँ है।
नमस्ते सबैजनालाई। मेरो नाम चाहिँ रितु राजवंशी हो। अनि अघि न अमिना दिदीले भन्नुभएको जस्तै र सजिलाजीले भन्नुभएको जस्तै म युएस एम्बेसीको बुक बस कार्यक्रममा 2018देखि आबद्ध छु। अनि अहिलेको लागि चाहिँ आजको यो पेपरमा अमिना दिदी र मैले मिलेर लेख्दै अनुसन्धान गर्दै लेख्न त्यो ट्राई गरिरहेको छौँ। सो एनी फिडब्याक, तपाईँहरूको के फिडब्याकहरू छ भने इट विल बी भेरी हेल्पफुल फर अस टु फिनिस। सो पहिला सुरु गर्नुभन्दा अगाडि हाम्रो यो प्रेजेन्टेसनको नाम चाहिँ नन स्टेट एक्टर्स कोलाबोरेसन इन एजुकेसन इन नेपाल पोसिबिलिटिज र च्यालेन्जेस छ। अनि यसमा चाहिँ बिफोर वी टक अबाउट इनोभेसन इन एजुकेसन फेयर, हाम्रो पेपर, हाम्रो स्टडीमा के छ भनेर कुरा गर्नुभन्दा अगाडि नन स्टेट एक्टर्स भनेको नै के हो, हु आर वी considering non-state actors भनेर भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ we are bringing यो पेपरको लागि चाहिँ we are bringing in the perspective and positions of a certain group of people who have been working in the field of education, mainly those individual educators and organization who took part in Innovation in Education Fair 2019 अनि उहाँहरूको चाहिँ उहाँहरूले गरिराख्नु भएको काममा एजुकेसन फिल्डसँग कसरी काम गरिराख्नु भएको छ, उहाँहरूको एक्सपिरियन्सेस कस्तो छ भनेर उहाँहरूको पोजिसन र पर्सपेक्टिभ लिएर आउन खोजिरहेको छौँ। अनि अब नेपालको एजुकेसन फिल्डको कुरा गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ नन स्टेट एक्टर्सहरूको इन्भल्भमेन्ट इज नट अ न्यू फिनोमेना। उहाँ नन स्टेट एक्टर्स, एनजिओ, सिभिल सोसाइटिजहरूको कन्ट्रिब्युसनले गर्दाखेरि एजुकेसन फर अल 1990s को एजुकेसन फर अल मुभमेन्टमा चाहिँ के अरे सम स्ट्राटेजिक बेनिफिट्सहरू आएको थियो, जस्तै द इन्भल्भमेन्ट अफ सिभिल सोसाइटिज ब्रट अ कस्ट इफेक्टिभनेस टु द डेभलपमेन्ट वर्क्सहरू, इनोभेटिभ अप्रोचेसहरू बढी आयो नेपालको एजुकेसन मुभमेन्टमा। अनि दे अल्सो ब्रट इन लाइक अ ग्रेटर इन्भल्भमेन्ट अफ कम्युनिटी भित्रबाट नै एजुकेसनमा अझै इन्भल्भमेन्टहरू कम्युनिटीको बढेको थियो भने बट देयर इन्भल्भमेन्ट अल्सो सर्ट अफ वाज नट फ्री अफ क्रिटिसिजम भनौँ न। यता ऱ्यापलीले भन्नुभएको जस्तै सिभिल सोसाइटीको कन्ट्रिब्युसनले गर्दाखेरि हाम्रो दे वर टर्म्ड एज अ कन्ड्युट अफ एजुकेसनल ट्रान्सफर भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ दे वर ब्रिङ्गिङ इन एजुकेसनल पोलिसिज एन्ड प्र्याक्टिसेस द्याट वर डिट्याच फ्रम लोकल रियालिटिज भनेर चाहिँ द्याट वाज वान अफ द क्रिटिसिजम द्याट in large civil societiesहरूले चाहिँ civil sotieties को work in Nepal has been receiving. So यो पेपरमा चाहिँ we were trying to look at non-state actorsहरूको कामहरू and how in the changing context यो फेडरलिजमको कन्टेक्स्टमा चाहिँ उहाँहरूको कन्ट्रिब्युसन कस्तो भयो भनेर चाहिँ we are trying to look at it through a single case that is innovation in education. So यसमा चाहिँ through this we are also trying to look at innovation in education fair मा भएको कुरा अझ innovation in education को fair को बारेमा भन्नुभन्दा अगाडि चाहिँ यो पेपरको पर्पस नै के थियो भनेर अलिकति चर्चा गर्छु। अनि त्यसमा चाहिँ while we were looking at IEF we were also looking at the various possibilities of network governance. So we were looking at what coming together of multiple actors with different funding mechanism र institutional arrangementsहरू different fieldsहरूमा education sector भित्र नै different fieldsहरूमा काम गरिराख्नु भएको एजुकेसन सेक्टरमा डिफ्रेन्ट लेभलमा करेस्पोन्ड गरिराख्नु भएको एक्टर्सहरूलाई चाहिँ एकै ठाउँमा लिएर आएर उहाँहरूको इन्टरेक्सन कस्तो हुँदो रहेछ त, त्यो इन्टरेक्सनले कस्तो खालको स्पेस दिन्छ, त्यो इन्टरेक्सनभित्र नै त्यो स्पेसभित्र पनि कस्तो खालको च्यालेन्जेसहरू थियो, कस्तो खालको पोसिबिलिटिजहरू थियो भनेर चाहिँ वी वान्टेड टु लुक एट द्याट एन्ड ट्राई टु स्टडी द्याट टु अन्डरस्ट्यान्ड द नेटवर्क गभर्नेन्स द्याट नेपाल एज अ कन्ट्री अनि एजुकेसन field in Nepal is going through, हैन। सो यस्तो यो आइएफमा भएको आइएफभित्र त्यो फेयरभित्र भएको डिफ्रेन्ट फेसिलिटेटर्सहरू, डिफ्रेन्ट अर्गनाइजेसन्सहरू, डिफ्रेन्ट स्कुल टिचर्स, प्रिन्सिपल्सहरू जो पनि स्टेक होल्डर्स हुनुहुन्थ्यो उहाँहरूको इन्टरेक्सन, उहाँहरूको कोलाबोरेसनको स्टडी गरेर चाहिँ वी वर बेसिकली ट्राइङ टु आन्सर what are the possibilities for non-state actors to engage in the process of transforming education in the changing context. अनि changing context भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ we are also trying to understand यो फेडरलिजमले ल्याएको लोकल गभर्मेन्टले जुन बेसिक र प्राइमरी एजुकेसनमा जुन एक्सेस ग्रान्ट भएको छ उहाँहरूलाई कस्तो खालको पोसिबिलिटिजहरू लिएर आउनु भयो क्रिएट भएको छ त त्यो 2015 को कन्स्टिट्युसनले गर्दाखेरि। अनि त्यो स्पेसले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ लोकल गभर्मेन्ट मात्र नभइकन यो नन स्टेट एक्टर्सहरूले कोलाबोरेट गर्नको लागि कस्तो खालको अपर्च्युनिटिजहरू पाउनुभयो र कस्तो खालको त्यो कोलाबोरेसन गर्ने स्पेस लगत्तै चाहिँ कस्तो खालको इस्युजहरू र च्यालेन्जेसहरू फेस गर्नु पर्यो भनेर वी वर बेसिकली ट्राइङ टु आन्सर द्याट क्वेसन विथ दिस स्टडी। अनि यसको लागि चाहिँ we looked at, or we looked at innovation in education fair as one of the cases for the अर्को slide. Sorry. So innovation in education fair लाई चाहिँ एउटा केस लिएर चाहिँ we used a single case study methodology अनि innovation in education fair भित्र नै रहेर त्यो 4 दिनको फेयरमा चाहिँ हामीले डेटा कलेक्ट गर्नको लागि इन डेप्थ इन्टरभ्युजहरू लियौँ अनि फेयरमा मात्र फेयरमा भएको कुराकानी मात्र सीमित नरहेर फेयर पछि पनि अरू जस्तै त्यो रिसर्च गर्दै जाँदाखेरि लिटरेचर रिभ्यू गर्दै जाँदाखेरि अरू कुराहरू पनि बुझ्न मन लागेपछि चाहिँ वी अल्सो ट्राई टु गेट इन टच विथ द फेसिलिटेटर्स द पार्टिसिपेटिङ टिचर्स आफ्टर द फेयर इटसेल्फ पनि अनि फर दिस टु कलेक्ट द डेटा वी conducted in-depth interviews with participating teachers, workshop facilitators, representatives from the Damak municipality itself, and past and present directors of the fair as well. अनि यसको लागि चाहिँ अब इनोभेसन इन एजुकेसन फेयर भनेको नै के हो भनेर इन्ट्रोड्युस गर्नु पर्दाखेरि चाहिँ सो 2019 को इनोभेसन इन एजुकेसन फेयर भन्दा पनि इट स्टार्टेड सो फेयर यो चाहिँ एनुअली हुने फेयर हो अनि इट स्टार्टेड इन 2016 अनि directors of the fair or organizing teamहरूलाई नै सोद्धाखेरि इनोभेसन इन एजुकेसन फेयर भनेको के हो भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ it is a forum for professionals working in the education field to come together and make the different educational practices more approachable भनेर भन्नुहुन्छ अनि यसमा चाहिँ अब एजुकेसन फिल्डमा लर्निङ टिचिङ प्र्याक्टिसेसहरूलाई चाहिँ कसरी रोड मेमोराइजेसन भन्दा ट्रेडिसनल रोड मेमोराइजेसन ट्रेडिसनल रिगर्जिएसन अफ इन्फर्मेसन भन्दा पनि टिचिङ लर्निङ प्र्याक्टिसेसहरूलाई कसरी अप्रोचेबल बनाउनको लागि चाहिँ एउटा स्पेस क्रिएट गर्नको लागि चाहिँ इनोभेसन एजुकेसन फेयर आएको भनेर चाहिँ भन्नुहुन्थ्यो अनि आइएफ वाज बोर्न आउट अफ अ फेल्ट निड सो यसको बारेमा कुरा गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ डिरेक्टर्सहरूले एजुकेसन फिल्डमा काम गरिराख्नु भएको इन्डिभिजुअल एजुकेटर्सहरू एन्ड डिफ्रेन्ट अर्गनाइजेसन्सहरू रिप्रेजेन्टेटिभ्स अफ डिफ्रेन्ट अर्गनाइजेसन्सहरू चाहिँ सबैजनाले स्कुल्सहरूसँग सबैजनाले एजुकेसन फिल्डहरूसँग चाहिँ एउटा साइलोसमा बसेर काम गरिराख्नु भएछ एउटा सेपरेट आइसोलेसनमा बसेर आफ्नो आफ्नो प्रोजेक्टहरू गरिराख्नु भएको छ आफ्नो एक्सपिरियन्स बटुलिराख्नु भएको छ मिस्टेक हुन्छ च्यालेन्जेस आउँछ बट दे आर अल्सो लर्निङ फ्रम देयर ओन एक्सपिरियन्सेस बट दे आर डुइङ इट इन आइसोलेसन सो आइएफ वाज this response to the need that they felt to bring all of these professionals together and learn from each other, to grow from each other भनेर भन्नुहुन्थ्यो अनि so 2019 को फेयरमा चाहिँ 2016 देखि चाहिँ they've been evolving from like working solely only with the teachers to working with principals, school leadership to municipality भने 2019 मा के भयो भने for the first time in the IEF history they worked with the fair was being organized in direct collaboration with the municipality अनि यसले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ the fair was offering 7 different workshops and it was being organized with the help of 9 different independent educators and 9 representatives of 19 different organizations and the municipality भित्रकै त्यो डाइरेक्ट कोलाबोरेसनले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ म्युनिसिपालिटी बाट नै इन्करेजमेन्ट आएको म्युनिसिपालिटीकै ब्याकिङ भएकोले चाहिँ the fair was able to engage with 192 teachers from 40 different schools within the municipality itself. And यसमा चाहिँ अब के अरे इनोभेसन भनेको के हो भनेर क्वेसन आउँदाखेरि चाहिँ what innovation in education मा चाहिँ we had a lot of question going in 2019 को फेयरमा जाँदाखेरि चाहिँ innovation भनेको के हो त what is innovation in education भनेको what could that look like for the organizing team for the director of the fair भनेर सोध्दाखेरि चाहिँ for like IEF को catalog हेर्दाखेरि innovation was anything that basically challenged the dominant teaching practices based on rote memorization. So the whole fair was being designed in a way where the teachers who came in as participants, who came in as students within these workshop settings could experience what immersive learning and teaching practices could look like in classrooms. So हाम्रो यो innovation in education fair, so यो design गर्ने बेलामा नै all of the facilitators, all of the 9 independent educators or representatives of independent like organizations working in the education field, they would come together and they were basically asked to collaborate with each other and to create a workshop session, to create a workshop module where the teachers could experience these immersive learning and teaching methods. अनि यस्तो गरेको चाहिँ किन why did the directors or the organizing team felt that this was necessary, what did they think this यसले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ के अचिभ भयो भनेर सोध्दाखेरि चाहिँ one of the fair organizers अर्गनाइजर्सहरूले चाहिँ के भन्नुभयो भन्दाखेरि this यो अप्रोचले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ they wanted the teachers to experience what it was like to be in a classroom where these approaches were being used in the training नै भनेर भन्नुभयो कि so they wanted the teachers who were coming in as participants in the workshop to experience a certain level of empathy with their students अनि यसबाट चाहिँ what they wanted was to create a nuanced, a felt need for instead of the fair telling the participants, the participating teachers, this is right, this is wrong, rote memorization is wrong. They wanted the teachers to go out from the workshop session with a felt need to like change the teaching practices, which for Amina and I, which we thought that was very interesting because to design an entire event with empathy in mind, with like getting the teachers to think about practicing rather than just like learning these contexts, learning pedagogical theories. They wanted the teacher to feel something. They wanted the teachers to feel that they could do more inside the classroom rather than feel restricted, and not judging whether innovation in education fair achieved that or not. We thought this going into the event with that objective was really interesting. And I think now Amina Didi will talk more about the greater teacher education in Nepal. And
so अहिलेसम्म thank you Ritu ji. So अहिलेसम्म Ritule भनेको कुरामा I'll just add on a bit. So the whole idea of doing this research is, as Ritu pointed out, there's been this emergent group of educators, different kinds of organizations, and we kind of distinguish these organizations from the traditional what we call like the civil society, often called the civil society, or the NGOs working in education. When we did our literature review, there was not enough work done on in terms of researching what are these what we call non-state actors doing in the field of education. Your National Campaign for Education network a majority of these organizations, the whole effort of Education for All has been emphasizing on access and equity in education. Having said that, there are quite a few organizations that have been doing work with schools, either in a collaborative manner or also on a one-to-one level with schools, directly with schools, that do focus exclusive on teacher education. There wasn't enough literature. There wasn't a lot of literature out there that actually did any kind of research on what kind of, so what's the philosophy there, what kind of ideas are driving these kinds of education initiatives. What we did look at, we wanted to situate within the broader context of in-service teacher education in Nepal. र यो कुरा हेर्दाखेरि नेपालमा एजुकेसन रिफर्मको डिस्कोर्सभित्र क्वालिटी अफ एजुकेसन or quality of teaching learning is definitely one of the key areas. र क्वालिटीलाई चाहिँ usually the lack of quality in education has often been articulated in terms of bad teaching, poor teaching, and often kind of putting it as traditional rote learning को teachingहरु त्यो चाहिँ that's kind of ineffective teaching भएर त्यो एउटा चाहिँ डिस्कोर्स पाइएको छ र त्यसको एभिडेन्सको रूपमा चाहिँ के प्रस्तुत गरेको पाइन्छ भने often the low student achievements, relatively high dropout rates, absenteeism, and grade repetition that we see in public schools. Again, यो कुरा चाहिँ हामीले we're primarily doing this, looking at this of what's being done within the public school system. Okay? So as a result of that, there've been like these national level initiatives in the last couple of decades. We had SSRP, the School Sector Reform Program, and the School Sector Development Program, SSTP, is ongoing right now, started in 2016. यसै अन्तर्गत पनि there've been several teacher training programs over the years. So when there was a joint review done of this SSRP and the impact of SSRP, particularly on the teacher training program, the teacher education programs that was done during the period of SSRP, a joint review pointed out that there was a concern with the transfer of the training of the teachers to the classroom. So although statistically almost like 90% of the in-service teachers had been trained in these new methods of teaching and learning, there was very little evidence of significant improvement in terms of learning achievements of students. So although the teachers were being trained, your students or learning outcome had not significantly changed. Statistics had shown, and this is like your learning achievement के को आधारमा calculate गरिन्छ. What is the indicator of learning achievement? Often it's been SLC results in the past, and public schools it's kind of hovered around 38%, whereas in private schools it's significantly much higher, in 85%. So you currently say over the years there has actually also been a lot of critique of teacher education initiatives in Nepal and the efficacy of these kind of teacher education Nepal, and some of these critiques, they've been written a lot about it. One of the primary critiques of these teacher education initiatives is the mismatch between what is being taught and the shift in the curriculum. The curriculum has now shifted to a more competence-based curriculum rather than content-based curriculum. The assessment patterns have not changed. The assessment is still about testing memory rather than actually assessing the learning. The other thing that is mostly around the contextual factors that have led to the lack of transfer of training into the school environment and into the classroom. You'd say largely some of these issues are around school environment, indifferent school management, lack of motivation and incentives for the teachers to actually apply and improve their practice, lack of support for the teachers in schools, their voice not being heard even in the teacher education program, their experience is not being counted enough, also lack of preparation time, some tight schedules. Some of them have even said like unruly students and large classroom size. So all of these factors have been attributed to the lack of transfer of training of these teacher education programs in actually making any significant change in learning achievements in the public school system. अर्को एउटा चाहिँ क्रिटिकाको के पनि पाइएको छ भने the critique of the teacher training program itself. Over the years, the major, the massive national level teacher training programs have been kind of run in a largely centralized way, but using a cascading model. What I mean by that is the curriculum and the design of what was actually decided at the center by a small pool of experts. One of the reviews of these teacher education program also highlighted the fact that the people who actually designed the training program are not teachers themselves, the university professors who do not teach in schools. But at 11, it's question mark. So, and then it's been implemented in a cascading way. But then there are also other counter arguments that it's not so much as the design of the program, but it has to do with the implementation of the program itself. Okay? Hang on, the screen is frozen. Okay. So within this whole discourse of, कस्तो खालको teacher education program will improve the learning, within this, the whole idea of quality has been quite elusive in this, and there has also been critiques about how quality has been conceptualized. The discourse in educational reform that is found in the literature, but also the broader discourses that you see in policy meetings and policy arena, it's like when they talk about the quality, there has been, it kind of taught, there's more conversations around the conditions that will enable quality, and not so much information, not so much discussion around the actual practice of teaching and learning. So Tuesday is missing from this whole discourse on quality. The lack of conceptualization of quality itself was also highlighted in the SSRP joint review in this statement. The relative lack of progress observed during the SSRP period in quality education can be related to insufficient conceptualization, prioritization, and resourcing for quality. Recently, in the recent years, there have been some very positive policy developments in education. Nepal, under the SSTP program, where the teacher education program has kind of shifted more towards opportunities for school-based and more learner-centered. By learner-centered, I mean teachers as the learners, as part of the teacher education program, and more praxis-oriented approach in teacher education program. You could say we found this in the documents, and there's also been like a 8-point competency framework for the teacher, where there's various like pedagogical knowledge, content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge is also counted as one of the important competencies for teachers. To what extent these have been actually implemented and how they've been implemented, there's not enough literature, and that's another area that kind of requires more research. So within this concept, with this, what is still yet to unfold is there has been some work in terms of अहिलेको बदलिदो अवस्थामा educational governance with the federal system, what would be the opportunities, but a lot of these focus on more of the governance and the administration of education, and not so much on teaching itself, like pedagogical reform itself. So that's another area that that also needs some investigation, and we're hoping this research or this particular paper would kind of add to that conversation. That's how we're kind of framing um, our um, our paper at the moment. Ritu, do you have anything to add to that, or shall I move on?
Yeah, you can.
So when we're using the word collaboration, the word collaboration, I think, I mean, we talk a lot about collaboration education, and in fact, the competency-based model now, we talk about the 4 Cs, and of the 4 Cs, collaboration skills one and one. So I think that particular idea itself needs some unpacking, and what do we actually mean when we're collaborating? There's a lot of literature. A couple of decades ago, at least in the literature coming out of United States, Australia, and Canada, where the broader literature on education leadership emerged. There is a lot of talk about collaboration, and collaboration has been kind of identified as one of the key, like as one of the imperatives for educational reform, and particularly pedagogical reform. And going through the broader literature on collaboration, we kind of settled on Slater idea of what collaboration is. So Slater kind of identifies these 4 basic tenets of what collaboration demands. First of all, there needs to be a common goal, the common understanding of what to collaborate on, what are we collaborating on, and this goal is developed through a negotiated process, and it's kind of the goals are formulated in the process of collaboration. So that's part of the collaboration process as well. The collaboration process also requires joint working and interdependence, the understanding of interdependence. So it's not just people working together, but each doing their own work, but there is a lot of interdependence going on in the process of collaboration as well. Another important point that has been highlighted is the need for parity in relationship. And this basically comes from the fact that in public management, whether it be health or education, there's always there's not necessarily parity in terms of, or there's not equality in terms of relationships, especially between the government and those in the non-government sector, because of resources, but there are other sources of power as well. So collaboration गर्ने हो भने यस्तो खालको कन्टेक्स्टमा चाहिँ there needs to be a building of relationship where there are possibilities for evening out this disparity in the relationship through sharing of power, sharing of knowledge, and sharing of influence. अब जस्तो नेपाल जस्तो केसमा चाहिँ I think this is quite a tricky issue, and this kind of comes up a lot. This concern comes up a lot in our in our case study as well, the concern with power and inequality of power, and how that actually is a main issue in collaboration. The final point that Slater points out is the voluntary participation in the collaboration. So collaboration being a buzzword, and looking at the literature, there is there's also the coinage of this term called collaborative governance. We are also a little bit wary of how it's being co-opted in the literature, and there is some literature that have kind of put out like collaboration, an idea that is primarily promoted by the neoliberal ideology that has been seeped into every side of governance, every aspect of governance. So the idea of collaboration often has also been used to kind of pass down the buck, to kind of pass down the responsibility of provision of public services, something like a public good like education, from the state to the local community, to independent organizations, to the private sector as well. So you kisma say to what extent the participation is voluntary, the collaboration voluntary भन्ने कुरामा चाहिँ question आउन सक्छ. But for collaboration to really work, to have that kind of synergistic effects that have been assumed to happen through collaboration, participation has to come from this perceived value of doing collaboration itself, and not because of administrative requirements or administrative imperatives. So that's another condition of collaboration. So we've kept this, we're not using this framework in a very deductive way to kind of examine our data, but we're kind of putting this idea of collaboration at the back of our minds as we're going through the stories and the interview data that we've got in our research. So when we were going through the narratives and looking at the case study of IEF and how IEF was organized and what happened before and after IEF, and Ritu and I, we've actually been in conversation with some of the participants of IEF even after the event as well. There are two main things that at this moment, and we're still in the process of kind of writing up the analysis part of this paper. The two main things that emerged from the data. The first point was the idea of the imperative of change. अब नेपालमा एजुकेसनल रिफर्मको लागि स्पेसली खास पेडागोजिकल चेन्जको लागि एजुकेसनको क्वालिटीलाई एनहान्स गर्नुको लागि त्यो चेन्ज चाहिँ किन हुनु पर्यो र कहाँबाट आउनु पर्यो भन्ने the ideas around it, the stories around it, the narratives around it. That was quite interesting for us to look at. And so one of the dominant stories that came out through the interviews and listening to different people was actually putting at the problem of education in this whole idea about the public versus private. What I mean by that is there were some interviews that participants that would share नेपालको शिक्षाको समस्या के हो भन्दाखेरि प्राइभेट र पब्लिकको बिचमा ठुलो ग्याप छ प्राइभेट पब्लिकको क्वालिटी किन छैन भन्दा पब्लिक स्कुलहरू चाहिँ प्राइभेट स्कुल जस्तो छैन भन्ने खोजेको प्राइभेट स्कुल जस्तो भनेको कस्तो हो भन्ने कुरा गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ then there are certain dominant perceptions about what is it about private schools that they are deemed to be better in quality. So you could have say there also been some literature, there's also been some research in this area already, but even through our research, it kind of confirms that the general narrative around private schools to be considered more efficient because of their managerial style, their administrative style. The teachers assumed to be better in teaching, and the student learning outcomes also better. And this is kind of also supported by evidence in terms of how the learning achievement is seen overall. Just so in the past, like recent data say but in one of the recent past data SLC although in our education system, roughly 80% go to public school, 20% go to private school. In terms of the pass rate, it's actually the opposite. 80%, almost around 80% that actually succeed in SLC exams come from the private sector, and the pass rate from the public sector is actually much low. So because of this higher pass rate, success rate from the private sector, there is this dominant, has kind of maintained this dominant perception that private schools are better at teaching and learning. You could say this is another area that needs further investigation. So what is the quality of teaching, learning in private schools? We know that there are some private schools that do put a lot of emphasis on pedagogical reform, but to what extent we can actually generalize it across the board, that's still, I think, kind of questionable. So एउटा चाहिँ मेन चाहिँ यो इम्पेरेटिभ टु चेन्ज कहाँबाट भन्दा पब्लिक स्कुललाई प्राइभेट स्कुल जस्तो बनाउने भन्ने एउटा चाहिँ डिस्कोर्स छ। त्यो अर्को डिस्कोर्स चाहिँ अब जस्तो आइएफ जस्तो भनौँ न, आइएफमा जुन आबद्ध भएका संस्थाहरू छन् उनीहरूको चाहिँ कोलाबोरेसन लिएर कसरी चेन्ज गर्न सकिन्छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ इट काइन्ड अफ follows in from the first point, the perceived value addition of collaboration and partnership. So isma चाहिँ यो IEF को मा चाहिँ because it was kind of partially funded, although there's a lot of voluntary work also that put into it. A lot of people actually worked in the process on pro bono basis or with very nominal remuneration. A lot of people actually contributed from their own organizations that participated in this collaborative effort. And then US Embassy Book Bus also had a major role in terms of funding this event. So त्यो खालको चाहिँ एउटा भनौँ न labeling or त्यो खालको brandingले गर्दा there was this kind of perceived value addition कि यस्तो खालको चाहिँ नि के भन्छ एक्टर्सहरू हाम्रो पब्लिक स्कुल सिस्टममा आयो, and if they do events like this भयो भने that will actually enhance the image of the school and image of the public schooling system as well, and it will also contribute to some extent in giving and bringing new ideas. So there's this also idea of where do the good ideas, the progressive ideas, where do they come from भन्ने कुरामा पनि there is this kind of perceived notions of who gets to bring the good ideas भन्ने पनि त्यो पनि एउटा चाहिँ dominant भएको पाइयो imperative for change को कुरा गर्दाखेरि. The third point in terms of bringing change, imperative for change, is then again some initiated from the leadership itself, and also the role of the leadership in envisioning change as well. अब यसमा चाहिँ leadership भन्नाले municipal level को leadership पनि लिन्छ. One of the things that has been found, and also it was shared by IEF को directors हरू, one of the things that has been interesting in the post भनौँ न अहिलेको यो federal चाहिँ governance को system मा चाहिँ municipalities that have भनौँ न members or भनौँ न mayor अथवा deputy mayor को position होस्, if there are individuals that have had background in teaching or have had been principals or have had some relationship with schools, they're more open and they're more progressive and they're more proactive, proactive to actually and receptive to this kind of collaboration and this kind of work, and so they show more enthusiasm भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ त्यो कुरा पनि आएको छ. So एउटा चाहिँ leadershipले municipalityले नै कसरी लिन्छ, how do they see their role in terms of shifting education भन्ने कुरा, that comes across as a very important thing, हैन. र यसमा चाहिँ definitely we did see that the municipality was taking a very strong leadership role in that, in terms of coordinating and collaborating with the different groups here. But also the leadership of the team within the municipality, but also the leadership of the schools themselves. That is also very important. But having said that, your leadership भित्र पनि there was not a uniform त नभन्नु हैन, अब uniformity हुनु त कुरै भएन, त्यो अपेक्षा गर्न पनि मिल्दैन. But in terms of the understanding of why this kind of collaboration, and there was some kind of cynicism, some kind of question, some kind of शङ्का जस्तो, and this was again towards the perceived interest and role of the NGOs. अब यो भनौँ न डलरबाट चलेको संस्थाहरूले आएर हाम्रो स्कुलको सिस्टममा आएर के चाहिँ गर्छ उनीहरूले, what do they know भन्ने कुरा, त्यो हिसाबको चाहिँ एउटा भनौँ न skepticism पनि त्यहाँ पाइयो. र यसले गरेर पनि that kind of played a role in भनौँ न हामीले we're not necessarily evaluating the degree of collaboration, but definitely if you look at the model of collaboration itself, that would definitely present its own kinds of challenges in terms of doing collaborative work at a local level. The other point that came up, and you could say अघि रितुको उसमा पोइन्टहरुमा पनि यो आएको थियो, I mean space was a very important thing for improving education, even in the conceptualization of IEF. And this idea of space, needing space, having space, was kind of coming through again and again. And this came across much more strongly in the interviews with the teachers and the educators. That यो आइडियाजहरु चाहिँ आउँछ हैन, अब यो चाहिँ राम्रो पढाउने भने कस्तो हो, क्लासरुममा राम्रो पढाउने, राम्रो टिचिङ मेथड्स भने के हो भन्ने कुरा, यो आइडियाजहरु चाहिँ छ. तर यो कुरालाई खाली जानेर मात्र भएन, यसलाई प्र्याक्टिस गर्ने, यसलाई सिक्ने, एकअर्कामा छलफल गर्ने, डिबेट गर्ने, क्वेशन गर्ने, यस्तो खालको चाहिँ त्यो स्पेस चाहिँ एकदमै जरुरी छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ आयो. र आइएफलाई चाहिँ त्यस्तो खालको स्पेसको रूपमा चाहिँ लिएको पाइयो हैन. सो यो चाहिँ एजुकेटर्सहरुबाट पनि आएको थियो, because a lot of the educators are very unique in the sense that they're working in isolation. They're working in isolation in various modes of partnership with different organizations. But you ठाउँमा चाहिँ what many of the collaborators and the educators were saying कि यहाँ चाहिँ अरूले पनि कसरी काम गरिरहेछ भनेर हेर्न पाइयो. र the way the workshops were designed as well, like for instance there would be like a STEM educator paired up with a music therapist, for instance, I mean the way they were working together, that kind of gave them the opportunity to actually imagine what can be done in a classroom in different ways that was not possible before. So यो space को महत्त्वको बारेमा चाहिँ एकदमै कुराहरु आइरहेको थियो. यो space कै कुरा गर्दा यो space मा चाहिँ then again space को कुरा गर्ने बित्तिकै space are always kind of striated, they always kind of already constructed through power relations. अब relation हुने बित्तिकै त्यहाँ power को कुराहरु आइहाल्छ हैन. So त्यहाँ चाहिँ there was a kind of use space मा who gets to do what in this space and how भन्ने कुरामा चाहिँ there were certain assumptions about expertise, and यसमा चाहिँ there were definitely some questions raised about the expertise of the educators themselves, यसमा चाहिँ जो चाहिँ collaborators-हरु हुनुहुन्थ्यो, कतिपय collaborators-हरु they are kind of relatively young, अब they did not kind of project the typical experts or big years of education, and that says a lot about हाम्रो education को discourse नै, हाम्रो education को policy making मा देखि लिएर हाम्रो education को practice, यो जुन छ नि education reform को practice मा चाहिँ who has a say, who is dominant, who is regarded as an expert bhanema pani, there's these certain kinds of caste, class, or certain kinds of background को मान्छेहरुको चाहिँ बढी dominance भएको केसमा चाहिँ there are questions about who are these people, why are they coming here and telling us how to do our teaching भन्ने खालको questions हरु पनि raise भएको पाइयो. So यसमा पनि, so that was very interesting to observe, and there was a kind of feedback कि यस्तो खालको यो खालको एजुकेसन टिचर एजुकेसन गर्ने हो, टिचर्सहरुको चाहिँ टिचिङ लर्निङमा चेन्ज ल्याउने भने यस्तो खालको कार्यक्रम गरेर भएन, यसलाई त अलिक केन्द्रीय तहमा लानु पर्यो हैन, चेन्ज ल्याउने हो भने भन्ने खालको पनि पायो. एन्ड दिस वाज काइन्ड अफ काउन्टर टु द स्पिरिट अफ फेडरलिजम हैन, जसरी चाहिँ हैन जस्तो हाम्रो लिटरेचरले पनि कोलाबोरेसन लिटरेचरले पनि पेडागोजिकल रिफर्म हेज टु बी मोर लोकलाइज्ड, मोर क्लासरुम बेस्ड, मोर स्कुल बेस्ड भन्ने कुरामा चाहिँ देयर आर अल्सो काइन्ड अफ counter ideas coming through, and mostly people in very powerful positions बाट यस्तो कुराहरु आएको थियो के यस्तो कुराहरु चाहिँ we have to take it more at the district level, केन्द्रतिकोबाट आयो भने अझ स्ट्रङ हुन्थ्यो यस्तो कुराहरु भन्ने खालको कुराहरु चाहिँ आएको थियो. So यो स्पेसमा चाहिँ navigating power was very interesting, and there were certain educators who said this space opens up because यो स्पेसमा it enables us to do what we want to do because we all come here equally, we're all learners. यसमा सिक्ने र सिकाउने भन्ने छैन भन्ने पनि त्यो आइडियाजहरु पनि आएको थियो. यद्यपि there were also some very strong ideas about experts and learners. There are these experts who come to teach, and there are learners who take things भनेर. यो चाहिँ सरप्राइजिङली केही टिचर्सहरुबाट पनि आएको थियो. टिचर्सहरुको चाहिँ एक्सपेक्टेसन के छ in terms of in some ways they were looking for the space for improving their practice as well, but there was also some kind of expectation in the sense कि हामीलाई पेडागोजीको बारेमा हामीले धेरै कुरा सिकिसक्यौं, we know all the ideas of pedagogy, but we need more content भन्ने खालको फिडब्याकहरु पनि आएको थियो. अनि त्यसलाई कोट्याउँदै जाँदा what do you mean by that भनेर कोट्याउँदै जाँदाखेरि चाहिँ the sense that we got was a lot of these teachers are very familiar with some of these buzzwords, inquiry based learning, project based learning, student centered learning, child centered learning, त्यो खालको these buzzwords that come, or integrated learning भन्ने खालको that are used. But what they have not been able to do is then how do we implement it in my particular content, in my particular subject, in my classroom भन्नेमा चाहिँ. And that this is where they were expecting input कि एउटा चाहिँ वर्कशीटहरु जस्तो यो कुरोलाई चाहिँ मैले इन्क्वायरी बेस्ड हैन, मेरो चाहिँ म्याथ्सको यो पर्टिकुलर कन्टेन्टलाई मैले इन्क्वायरी बेस्ड लर्निङको प्रयोग विधि प्रयोग गरेर कसरी पढाउने त भनेर they wanted some manual typeको. So they were basically seeing the individuals as experts, okay, rather than using that space as a learning and deliberation place, right? So यो दुईटा कुराहरु चाहिँ kind of came strongly through the data. Ritu, do you have anything to add to what I've just shared?
No, it's just it was reminding me of all the interviews that we took on the idea of how like certain teachers or यति वर्षदेखि पढाइराखेको टिचर्सहरुलाई नै पढाउनको लागि चाहिँ यति खालको लेभलको अर्को लेभल पुगेन भनेर त्यो आउने. आई थिंक त्यो navigating powerमा पनि how एउटा क्लासरुम भित्र वर्कशप सेसनमा त्यो पावरको रिलेसन कसरी इन्टरप्रेट भइराखेको छ भनेर त्यस्तो खालको कमेन्ट्सहरु आउने के which I thought was really interesting.
So I think यो कुरामा चाहिँ कोलाबोरेसनको कन्टेक्स्टमा पनि अनि यो एजुकेसन रिफर्मको कन्टेक्स्टमा पनि how power works भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ it's coming through this again. अब यसको लागि चाहिँ we did not go into the study examining, we talk because of we kind of blindly went into it without any preconceived ideas. So a lot of these ideas and issues that are emerging from the study itself probably open up ideas for further research as well. And I think navigating power in this discourse of educational reform, particularly at the local level, of a higher level, policy level matter, there has been some writing in that area. The local level matter, when we talk about localized practices and local level partnerships, I think this is something that needs warrants further investigation, right? Just checking my time here. So we're almost done towards the last slide. So this is like a quote I just wanted to put up from one of the festival directors that came. So so there are certain kinds of new ideas also coming up about what needs to be done to change the face of education, and there are so many approaches here. How do you know what is the best approach? So there's no one method or one good way of doing it, and even the ideas that are thrown around about that come under the the umbrella of progressive education. How does it actually work in the classroom? How do we actually apply it in the classroom? यसमा चाहिँ constant काम चाहिँ भइरहनु पर्छ भन्ने सेन्स चाहिँ आउन सक्छ हैन because when people develop ideas and approaches, they often do so based on their own contextual realities. And what works in one context may not necessarily just fit in another. There needs to be constantly people trying different things and learning and adapting these ideas. But you गर्ने हो भने चाहिँ what needs to change, what needs to happen भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ it becomes important, right? So यसमा चाहिँ यसबाट आएको चाहिँ हाम्रो अब conclusions भन्दा पनि we're still kind of playing around with our data and kind of listening to the interviews and going through the interview data as well. एउटा चाहिँ reflections like I think there needs to be some kind of examination of the very idea of the change for improving quality education as well, and the reform how is reform conceptualized भन्ने कुरा. Isma, one of the things that I found very interesting is Isma saying there's so much emphasis on the teacher, on the teacher and what the teacher does in the classroom. When this change is actually more about, it has to be seen more in a holistic manner, So this might say you discourses or think, how do we actually shift the discourses? How do we and who gets to shape the discourses about change? Yet discourse, there are ideas at the idea level. There are a lot of interesting new ideas that are emerging. How does it actually get implemented at the practice level? I think that is where the gap lies. So teachers' professional development needs to be conceptualized in a holistic manner. What I mean by that is the teacher professional development, particularly teacher education program and the learning and development of teacher practice needs to be embedded into the local context of the school. So this is not just about focusing on the teacher and what the teacher does in the classroom or the teacher as an individual, professional development, but it's more about the development of a whole school as a community of practice, of a school as a community of practice that practices these different ways of teaching and learning in the school environment. That is more suitable for the localized context. Of discourse now, we're also talking about localization of curriculum as well, medium of instruction, using local languages. You sabai कुराहरु आएको छ यो कुराको लागि चाहिँ यो institutional approach पनि आवश्यक हुन्छ जस्तो लाग्छ. So there are two things there. First, looking at the shift to change, how we think about change in terms of the institutional perspective of schools. अघिको जुन हामीले क्वालिटीको अवधारणाको कुरा गरेका थियौं त्यसमा चाहिँ private schools हरुलाई जसरी quality benchmark को रूपमा लिन्छ. The other thing that I'm also finding is this dominant idea of this corporatization of schools as institutions. So त्योबाट पनि कसरी shift गर्ने, and looking at schools not as corporate entities where there's this top-down command and control method of organization and management, but looking at schools as a community of practice, a shared practice. So your teaching भन्ने काम चाहिँ टिचरले मात्र गर्ने हैन, it's kind of the whole environment मै चाहिँ how do we embed that teaching practice there भन्ने कुरा. Teacher is teaching, but they're also facilitating this, but त्यसमा चाहिँ there's a shared responsibility in sense. The other point is to then also shift the idea of teaching itself from just knowing ideas and concepts to learning and practicing what to do. What does effective teaching look like in the teaching learning concept itself, हैन? अनि यो सबै कुराको लागि चाहिँ अब यो यसबाट पनि आइराको छ जुन अहिलेको स्पेसको कुरा छ नि, the need for opportunity for dialogue. यसमा चाहिँ डायलगको लागि स्पेस कसरी क्रिएट गर्ने भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ I think this is one of the things that has come across very clearly from this, and IEF may pani, I think that is what a lot of people appreciated is under the guise of doing this workshop that also opened up spaces to have conversations that they did not get to have before. So you खालको space चाहिँ कसरी create गर्ने भन्ने कुरा पनि it's become very important if we are to shift the reform, and again going back to the power relations and navigating about who gets to participate in dialogue, who gets to speak, whose words, whose voices are heard, and whose voices are counted in ideas around pedagogical reform. Important now. Before, Ritu, do you have any last comments or thoughts that you want to share? Okay, I think we're kind of done with it. So I'm going to stop my presentation here. We welcome thoughts, questions,